Hi, my name's Gene Bixby. I am Diane Bixby's father. And I can't remember the day that I enlisted, but it had to have been an exciting time for me. I had just turned 17 in November. It was now January. My service began on January 23rd, 1941. That happened to be my father's birthday. We didn't celebrate many birthdays at our house, and I didn't learn that until I had been in the Navy some time, when I read it in the newspaper. The process of enlisting was fairly simple. I had to pass a physical. I needed my parents' permission because I was a minor, and I signed up for a minority cruise. Minority cruise. That was from the date I signed up at age 17 until my 21st birthday. I received boot camp training at the Newport, Rhode Island Naval Training Center. That was followed by a few months at Great Lakes Naval Training Station, where I was sent to a machinist mate school at the Ford Motor Company in Dearborn, Michigan. I was sent to the Panama Canal, where I stayed 11 months and was there when Pearl Harbor was attacked. In August of 1942, when I saw 3 brand new destroyers tied up at the pier, I found someone to swap duties with me, and I joined the crew of the USS Lardner. It went directly to the war zone, which at that time was Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. I remained on that ship for 2 years and 3 months. I left it in the Central Pacific just before it left for Okinawa, where the Japanese were using kamikazes against our ships. The journey to my next assignment began in Peleliu in the Palau Islands. From there, I returned to the U.S. and was assigned to a small YP, Yard Patrol, boat base in East Boston, Mass. I was assigned there for a year, and that turned out to be just 3 or 4 months, though, because they needed persons with my rating. My rating was water tender, 3rd class. So they needed my rating on a new aircraft carrier that was being built in Quincy, Mass. And the new carrier was commissioned as the USS Philippine Sea. That was my last assignment. From there, I was discharged from the Navy. That was in December of 1945. And it was varied. A destroyer could go places that light cruisers or heavy cruisers couldn't go, not to mention battleships or aircraft carriers. They couldn't go that close. Destroyers could go in close. They could hide in the bushes, so to speak, in various coves. And so they would send destroyers in to do risky jobs, because losing a destroyer wasn't nearly as bad as losing a cruiser. So destroyers were selected to do very dangerous jobs from time to time. So we made various attacks on the where the Marines and the soldiers, Army soldiers, were fighting, and we would try to kill Japanese. And one time, Admiral Nimitz congratulated us. He said, "You apparently plastered yellow meat all over the countryside. Congratulations." That was for one of our attacks on Guadalcanal. And then we we encountered a heavy fire, often from the shore or from other ships or submarines, airplanes, and we were there when it happened. Uh, we evacuated wounded Marines from Bougainville in the darkness of night, and we took them to a hospital. I put that in quotes because it wasn't a hospital like downtown Indianapolis. Well, we took them to this hospital in Vella La Vella. We rescued survivors from the USS Wasp that was torpedoed and sank. I was sitting under the torpedo tubes on our ship, looking over at the Wasp, when suddenly it was hit by a torpedo, and the debris almost seemed like slow motion going up in the air. But it was hit enough so that it sank from more than one torpedo hit. And we picked up survivors from the sinking of that ship. We picked up 350 people in the water that survived. While defending Guadalcanal, we engaged in major and in minor skirmishes. The Japanese Navy was repeatedly sent task forces down to try and prevent us from keeping Henderson Airfield there at Guadalcanal. So a lot of action there. And in fact, our ship was engaged in 11 major engagements. So each of us got a medal for that. For the major engagements, 11. You don't get any medals for the skirmishes, and you can get killed in those too. Once we were anchored in Tulagi. Tulagi was just across the bay from Guadalcanal. And we were told that 14 enemy ships were approaching. We were alone in Tulagi Harbor. But there was a submarine, one submarine, U.S. submarine out there, that was going to knock off as many as they could of those 14 ships. Submarines missed a lot. They didn't always hit. But anyhow, their job was to do what they could to disable that task force of 14 ships. Then what they missed, there was a PT boat. That's a torpedo boat, a small boat, but it carried torpedoes, and they would make dashes towards the ships and let their torpedoes go. Then after that was us. So anything that got through, our orders were to stop it at all costs. Well, that was kind of a tense moment, but again, we lucked out. Nobody showed. So we just had a nervous period. We made a raid on Rabaul. These are things I can remember off the top of my head. Rabaul was a Japanese stronghold, and there was a 20-mile channel that we had to skirt through with Japanese emplacements on either side. There were 5 of us, 5 destroyers did that. And we went up into that 20 miles, and we didn't receive any damage, but we did a lot of damage to ships in Rabaul Harbor. My job during battle eventually changed. I was assigned to the fire room. The fire room is where the steam is made. Steam was used to power the main engines. It also used to run equipment that pumped oil and air into the boiler's firebox, and that ran the pumps that forced the water into the boiler's steam drum. My job was to regulate the water into the steam drum. As the main engine's demand for steam varied, the water level in the gauge could sometimes go out of sight, or a sudden decrease in demand could cause it to go out of sight. That would be a minor disaster. It could be a major disaster, because when it went over the top, that meant that the boiler was too full, and maybe water would be going into the steam, and that would stop the engines and stop all the auxiliary equipment. Or if it went below the bottom, that water too low, it could go so low that the tubes that connect to the steam drum and the firebox could melt with no water in them. So it was an important job, and a job with some stress, because frequently they would create such a demand that they would shoot right up, the water level would shoot right up over the top. So that was stressful. When we were manning our battle stations, it was not an average day. My first shooting day, I was in the sleeping compartment receiving 45-pound projectiles from a person in the magazine a little below to a person above me who was passing them along to the handling room, where they were loaded onto an elevator to the gun turret above. Through the loudspeaker system, it was announced that 18 enemy dive bombers were approaching. This was not good news, because we were just one of 2 ships participating in a bombardment of Guadalcanal. My quick math showed that that was 9 bombers each. How could they miss? Well, it turned out that they were not dive bombers, thankfully. They dropped their bombs, and they missed, except the quartermaster being hit by a small piece of shrapnel in the butt. Living on a ship was comfortable. The bed was about the size of a cot, usually three high. The food was good, there were showers and a laundry, and one was never alone. I had good friends and casual friends. There were about 250 officers and crew. We could read and play card games in our off hours. I was in the fire room. I stood watches. I was on watch 4 hours and off 8 hours, 24/7. Sometimes our routine was interrupted by general quarters. That's man your battle stations. We're visiting the many places that I went. Wellington, New Zealand. And incidentally, we encountered the roughest sea I ever experienced leaving there. Then we went to Samoa, New Caledonia, Tonga-Tabou, Espirito Santo, the Fiji Islands, Hawaii, Honolulu, Diamond Head, Guam, Palau, and of course places in the U.S. like Seattle, San Francisco. Also, beautiful island views of the lush tropical islands from our anchoring and from our anchors, where we anchored in hidden coves. It was just so beautiful, almost like a movie. Sometimes we swam off the ship, and we had many beautiful sunsets at sea. And sometimes we would sit under the torpedo tubes or other places around deck and watch the flying fish and dolphins as they swam along with us. On VJ Day, I was at the naval base described earlier called Lockwood Basin, located in East Boston. Since the war had ended for me months earlier, VJ Day was not memorable. I have a more vivid memory of VE Day because it was the day after May 9th when I stepped foot onto U.S. soil at Treasure Island near San Francisco after being away for over 4 years overseas. Our ship was a busy ship and a lucky ship, and we never were hit, and yet many ships that we were fighting alongside were hit. Some sunk, and one of those 3 destroyers that were tied up at the pier in Panama that I tried to swap on with some of my other buddies were on was sunk. So we had quite a record. And our ship went into Tokyo Bay, where General MacArthur signed this, or had the Japanese sign the surrender documents. So that was something we all look forward to. But I missed it because I was transferred earlier back to the States. That's a hard question to answer. Lots of lives are lost. Lots of those that survived have lost limbs. Lots have been crippled for life. That is a terrible cost, but it is the cost of freedom. Evil people who would take away our freedom remain on the earth today. We must remain so strong militarily that the would-be attackers would not dare to attack us, knowing that they could not win.